Look at these two images. Same subject, same AI tool, different prompts. One word changed this. You are about to see exactly why your AI images look average. And more importantly, the exact system that fixes it permanently.
Before we get started, let me make you a promise. In the next 62 minutes, you're going to completely transform how you communicate with AI image generators. You're going to move from random results to psychological precision. Every experiment in this documentary follows the exact same rule. Change one word, measure the complete psychological shift. The experiments you're about to see aren't cherry-picked successes. They're systematic explorations of the single most powerful variable in AI image generation, the psychological state embedded in your language. One word, one shift, an entirely different image psychology.
Here's the problem. Most people type a subject, add the word professional, hit generate, and wonder why the result looks like a stock photo. AI images are not just pictures. They are psychological objects. They trigger perception before you consciously process them. And right now, your prompts are triggering the wrong perceptions.
Watch experiment 1. On the left, a two-word prompt. A man. A background. The result is technically correct but emotionally empty. On the right, I added 8 variables. Same person, same model. Every single detail intentional. The difference is not better prompting. It is a completely different psychological approach. The brain processes visual signals in milliseconds before conscious thought. Status, trust, competence, danger, desire. These reads happen automatically. Generic prompts create visual noise. The brain categorizes, dismisses, scrolls. Controlled variables create visual signal. The brain engages, holds, remembers. Experiment 2. I kept everything identical and added exactly one thing, a mood reference. Look at what happened. The face reads differently. The emotion reads differently. The whole feeling of the image changed. One word. That is the power of the mood lever. Experiment 3. Now I add lighting. Still the same subject. Still the same mood reference from before. Just the lighting direction changed. Look at the perceived quality jump. Lighting alone accounts for 2 to 3 perceived quality levels in any image. Any image, Jakis. These are not random improvements. These are the first 3 variables of a system with 8 total. When you stack all 8, the result is something that cannot be distinguished from a top-tier editorial photo shoot. We call it the golden order. That's chapter 2. What you're seeing in these before and after images isn't just technical improvement, it's the difference between speaking to an AI in noise versus speaking to it in signal. Generic words like good or nice are noise. Psychologically precise words like serene or triumphant are signal. The AI generator doesn't evaluate quality. It pattern matches to emotional territory. In experiment 1, a single adjective transformed everything. Not because the AI learned something new, but because your instruction gave the neural network permission to draw from a completely different region of its training data. Every word you write is a filter applied to billions of images. Think of it this way. AI image generators were trained on billions of images, each tagged with language. When you use precise psychological language, you're filtering that entire training set down to exactly the emotional and aesthetic territory you want. Generic language gets you averaged results. Precise language gets you specific results. Now, let's step back and look at the architecture that makes all of this work systematically. In Chapter 2, I'm going to show you the 8-slot framework that turns single-word power into full-scale compositional control. This is the golden order, and it will permanently change how you write prompts.
This is the golden order. 8 variables. Every single one controls a different psychological response in your viewer's brain. Subject, action, setting, mood, lighting, camera, style, cinematic reference. Master these 8 slots, and you control perception.
Slot 1. Subject. This is not just a noun. It is a psychological anchor. The brain immediately maps a subject to a cultural archetype. Young entrepreneur reads as ambition and possibility. The subject sets the emotional frame for everything that follows, before any other variable is processed. Slot 4 is mood. Mood is where most people have the biggest untapped leverage. A mood reference activates the AI's entire learned library of emotional signals for that state. Micro-expressions, shadow patterns, color grading, muscle tension. One word loads thousands of visual decisions simultaneously. Slot 5 is lighting. After the next 3 chapters, you will never leave this slot undefined again. Lighting is not about illumination. Lighting is about the emotion you want the brain to process in the first 100 milliseconds of looking at your image. We will go very deep into this in Chapter 5. Slots 1 through 3 define who and where. Slots 4 through 8 define how the viewer feels. Feeling is what drives action. Feeling is what creates memory. Feeling is what makes someone stop scrolling and pay attention. That is what we are engineering, not images. Feelings. The golden order system works because each of its 8 slots represents a completely different psychological trigger. Subject and action establish who we're looking at and what emotional state they embody. Setting places that psychology in a physical world. Each slot is a separate dimension of visual psychology, and together they create a complete coordinate system for any image you want to generate. The mood slot is where most creators make their biggest mistake. They describe what the mood looks like instead of what the mood feels like. Don't say dramatic lighting. Say the quiet before a storm breaks. Don't say sad. Say the specific weight of something irreplaceable that's just ended. Mood is emotional texture, not visual description. Lighting in the golden order isn't just illumination. It's emotional direction. The same subject photographed under golden hour light feels like homecoming. Under cold blue studio light, it feels like interrogation. Same person, same pose, same setting, completely different psychology. Lighting is one of the highest leverage slots in the entire system. Camera angle in the golden order communicates power dynamics. A low angle looking up says this subject has authority over the space they occupy. A high angle looking down says this subject is vulnerable or introspective. This isn't artistic preference. It's visual psychology built into how humans perceive height and perspective from early childhood. Style reference is your secret weapon in the golden order. When you reference a specific film, a specific photographer, a specific painting tradition, you're importing an entire visual language with one phrase. Shot by Roger Deakins tells the AI more than a paragraph of technical description. You're citing a tradition, and the AI has absorbed that tradition from its training data. The magic happens when you start combining golden order slots with psychological precision. Subject plus mood plus lighting creates a narrative triangle. The subject has an inner psychology. The mood amplifies that psychology. The lighting makes it visible to the viewer. 3 slots working in concert create images that feel inevitable rather than accidental. Let me give you a concrete before and after example of the complete golden order in action. Before, a warrior. After, a lone warrior at a mountain pass, exhausted but unbroken, under the last light of sunset, low angle, cinematic style of Akira Kurosawa. Same subject. The second prompt visits a completely different universe of visual possibility. The before image looks like clip art. The after image looks like a film still from something that deserves to exist. That gap is not skill. That gap is system, and system is learnable. That's exactly what this documentary is. A systematic transfer of the psychological variables that close that gap. One critical principle from the golden order. Every slot should add psychological specificity, not just visual description. Ask yourself for each slot, what does this feel like? What does this communicate about the subject's inner state? What emotion does this invite the viewer to feel? If the slot doesn't answer one of these questions, it's adding noise rather than signal. Before we move to camera psychology in Chapter 3, I want to address the most common question I get. Does the order of words in a prompt really matter? Yes, it matters enormously. AI image generators read your prompt like a reader reads a paragraph. Early words establish context. Later words modify within that context. The golden order puts subject first because identity must anchor everything else. If you describe the lighting before the subject, the AI doesn't know whose light it's painting with. If you establish mood before you establish the subject, you get a mood without a psychology to inhabit it. Subject first, always. Everything else is commentary on who that subject is and what world they inhabit. Let me give you the complete golden order in a single sentence you can use as a mental checklist. Subject plus action. Setting. Mood, lighting. Camera angle. Style reference, cinematic tradition, 8 slots, each one a different dimension of psychological control. You don't need to fill all 8 every time. But knowing all 8 means you can choose precisely which dimensions to control for any given image. In Chapter 3, we're going to zoom in on one of the 8 slots with particular depth. Camera angle. Because of all the golden order variables, camera angle may be the most underestimated. Most creators think of camera angle as a framing choice. What we're about to discover is that camera angle is actually a statement about power, vulnerability, and the viewer's relationship to the subject.
Camera angle is the most misunderstood variable. Not because it's complex, but because most people never think about what it does to the viewer's psychology. Low angle. I added 2 words. Watch what happens to how your brain reads this person. Your brain is now placing this person above you. Evolutionarily, looking up means looking at something bigger, stronger, more dominant. 1 camera word. Total power shift. Wait. Stop. Look at this. This angle completely broke the image. This is what failure looks like in AI generation. And I want to show you exactly how to diagnose it.
High angle now. Camera above eye level, looking down. The subject shrinks slightly. The viewer gains elevation and perspective. High angle creates intimacy, vulnerability, or diminishment depending on the emotional context around it. Same 2 words. Completely opposite psychological effect from low angle. Dutch tilt. The camera rotates on the roll axis, just 3 to 7 degrees, and the entire emotional register changes. Unease, tension, instability. This is the subconscious geometry of thriller films. 2 words in your prompt, Dutch tilt, and the viewer feels a physiological anxiety response they cannot explain. Extreme close-up. The face fills the frame completely. The eyes are unavoidable. There is nowhere to look except directly into the emotion displayed. This is the camera angle of intimacy, intensity, and direct declaration. Use it when you need the viewer to feel one specific thing, with no visual escape. 5 camera angles. 5 completely different psychological outcomes. Same subject every time. The camera is not recording reality. The camera is manufacturing perception. And you control the camera with 3 words in your prompt. That is an extraordinary amount of power in a very small space. Low-angle shooting is the most psychologically loaded camera position in visual storytelling. When the camera looks up at a subject, it triggers a deeply evolutionary response. We associate height with dominance. Looking upward at something means it occupies a position of authority over our environment. Every heroic portrait in film history uses this instinct intentionally. High-angle shooting inverts that power dynamic completely. A subject shot from above appears vulnerable, contemplative, or small within their world. This doesn't make the shot less powerful. It makes it differently powerful. Use high angle when you want to convey intimacy, internal reflection, or a character who is overwhelmed by the scale of what surrounds them. The Dutch tilt, that classic diagonal camera angle, does something remarkable to viewer psychology. It creates disorientation without confusion. The world looks almost normal, but something is wrong. Something is unstable. Some assumption the viewer was making has been disrupted. Use it sparingly. One Dutch tilt in a sequence immediately signals, pay attention, something has shifted. Extreme close-up is the most intimate camera position available. When you fill an entire frame with a human eye, a hand holding something, a single expression forming on a face, you force the viewer into psychological proximity they didn't consciously consent to. This bypasses the social distance we normally maintain when looking at strangers, which is exactly why it feels so intense. Medium shots are the narrative workhorses of visual storytelling. They show enough of the body to communicate physical presence and gesture while maintaining enough distance for clear facial expression to read. When you're telling a story and aren't sure which angle to use, a medium shot is almost always the correct default. It positions the viewer in conversation with the subject. Wide establishing shots serve a specific psychological function. They orient the viewer in space and establish scale relationships. They say, before I tell you about this character, let me show you the world this character inhabits. Everything the wide shot reveals about the environment is simultaneously revealing something about the psychology of whoever lives there. One of the most powerful camera techniques is motivated camera movement, described in your prompt. Don't just describe a static angle. Describe what the camera is doing. Camera slowly pushes in as she speaks, creates building tension. Camera pulls back to reveal the crowd, creates a revelation of scope. Camera movement is psychological direction translated into visual kinetics. In the before and after experiments for camera psychology, notice that the difference isn't just framing or composition, it's emotional information. The before images give us bodies occupying physical space. The after images give us perspectives on psychological states. That fundamental distinction is what separates technical image generation from psychological precision. The failure experiment for Chapter 3 shows what happens when camera angle fights subject psychology directly. A triumphant subject shot from high angle reads as defeated rather than victorious. A vulnerable subject shot from low angle feels threatening instead of pitiable. Camera angle must align with the emotional truth you intend to express, not contradict it. When you move into Chapter 4 and mood psychology, remember that camera angle is always working in concert with mood. Low angle plus triumphant mood equals heroic scale. Low angle plus sorrowful mood equals tragic magnitude, the weight of someone too significant to survive what's happening to them. The angle amplifies the mood. Always choose them as a deliberate pair. Everything we've explored in camera psychology exists in service of one goal: making the viewer feel something specific. Not just see something interesting. Feel something specific. That's the difference between technical visual craft and psychological precision. Camera angle is the first choice you make about power, and it sets the emotional contract between image and viewer. The practical application of Chapter 3's camera psychology is simpler than it sounds. When you begin a prompt, ask one question first. What is the power relationship between the viewer and the subject? Should the viewer feel like they're looking up at something greater than themselves? Looking down at something intimate or vulnerable? Or engaging something at eye level as an equal? That single question determines your camera angle before you write a single word. The 6 camera positions we explored in Chapter 3, low angle, high angle, Dutch tilt, extreme close-up, medium shot, and wide establishing, cover nearly every psychological relationship between subject and viewer. Low angle, authority; high angle, intimacy or vulnerability; Dutch tilt, instability; extreme close-up, forced proximity; medium, conversation; wide, context and scale. Memorize these associations and your camera choices become instinctive. Chapter 4 is where the system begins to take on its full emotional depth. We're going to explore mood psychology, which is the most sophisticated and the most rewarding variable in the entire Nano Banana Pro framework. Mood isn't just the feeling of an image. It's the emotional environment that surrounds the subject, shapes the viewer's response, and determines whether an image is technically interesting or genuinely moving.
Mood references are the most powerful lever nobody talks about. Not because they change the image most dramatically, but because they change what the image means. I'm about to try something nobody does. Two opposite mood references in one prompt. Intense and vulnerable at the same time. Ready?
Experiment. Calm to intense. I changed one word. The face reads completely differently. The jaw tension, the eye engagement, the light interaction with the expression. Two entirely different people in the brain's social cognition system, even though it is the same model, the same camera, the same light. Mysterious now. This single word activated thousands of microsignals that the AI learned from millions of images tagged as mysterious. Glance angle slightly away from center, specific shadow depth on one side of the face, a micro-tension in the eyes that reads as concealed knowledge. One word, 1,000 decisions. Triumphant. This is one of the most commercially powerful mood states in visual marketing. Watch what happens. Mirror neurons activate in the viewer. They feel a faint echo of the triumph displayed. If your product is associated with this emotional state, the brain begins to associate owning your product with feeling this way. Stacked dual mood. Determined but vulnerable. Two words creating apparent contradiction. The brain is drawn to faces it cannot immediately categorize. Emotional complexity creates sustained attention because the visual cortex stays engaged trying to resolve what it is seeing. This is the psychology behind the images that go viral. You are not choosing an adjective when you choose a mood reference. You are selecting a neurological response that you want to trigger in your viewer's brain. The question before every prompt is not, how should this person look? The question is, how should my viewer feel when they see this image? Calm versus tense mood is the most fundamental psychological axis in visual storytelling. Every image exists somewhere on this spectrum. Calm images feel resolved, complete, breathable, like something that has found its resting state. Tense images feel compressed, unresolved, like something holding enormous energy back. Understanding this axis is your foundation for all mood work. The mystery mood is distinct from both calm and tension. Mystery isn't unresolved tension, it's deliberate incompleteness. Something is being withheld from the viewer. Information is present in the frame, but not fully legible, not fully accessible. When you want mystery, you must obscure as much as you reveal. The viewer should finish the image in their imagination. Triumphant mood has very specific physical requirements. It needs open space. It needs light that comes from high and broad, light that has room to fill. It needs height or upward reach or expansion. Triumph compressed into a dark, tight frame reads as defiance rather than victory. The open sky, the wide frame, the upward motion, these are the physical conditions that generate the psychology of triumph. Melancholic mood is the most complex emotional state to generate with psychological precision. Too much darkness and it collapses into despair. Too much softness and it dissolves into sentimentality. True melancholy lives in the exquisite tension between beauty and loss. The golden light of something ending, the tender clarity of something that can't be held. That tension is the target. One of the most powerful techniques in mood design is deliberate mood contrast within a single image. A triumphant figure in a devastated landscape. A tender moment of connection inside a cold, clinical environment. Mood contrast creates narrative complexity and emotional resonance that a single mood image almost never achieves. It makes the viewer hold two feelings simultaneously. The urgency mood requires specific temporal cues to be legible. Motion blur, compressed framing, subjects who are leaning forward into action, light that feels like it's racing the clock. Urgency is time running out made visual. Every element in a properly urgent image should be pointed at the same moment, the moment of just about to happen. Serene mood is not the same as static mood. Serenity is active peace. It's the peace that has survived turbulence and come to rest. Images that feel truly serene have a sense of settled presence. Light that has found its final angle for the day. Subjects that have come to rest after significant motion. Serenity is stillness with history. The reverent mood is most often achieved through specific combinations of scale and light direction. When a subject is made small relative to their environment, and the light feels ancient, coming from somewhere high and beyond the immediate frame. The image acquires the quality of sacred witness. The viewer becomes a pilgrim, not a tourist. In the experiments we ran for mood psychology, the single most consistent finding was this: naming a mood is not sufficient to generate it. You must describe the physical conditions that create that mood in actual human experience. Not intense but compressed frame, deep shadows at every edge, subject leaning forward with tension visible in the hands and jaw. Physical conditions generate psychological states. Dual mood images, images that hold two competing emotional states simultaneously, are the most psychologically complex artifacts you can generate with this system. They're also the most memorable. The image that makes you feel two things at once, triumph and grief, tenderness and danger, stays with a viewer long after they've forgotten technically superior images. Before we enter Chapter 5 and lighting psychology, here is the master principle for mood. Mood is the emotional environment your subject inhabits. It's not how the subject feels internally. It's the feeling their world generates around them and within the viewer. Subject and mood interact to create a third psychological state, the feeling the viewer has in response to their combination. The mood experiments in Chapter 4 demonstrated a counterintuitive finding. Negative moods often produce more psychologically powerful images than positive moods. Not because darkness is aesthetically superior, but because negative emotional states carry more specificity. Happy is a category. Triumphant after surviving loss is a complete psychological narrative that the viewer can enter and inhabit. When you're building mood into your prompt, start by identifying the primary emotional question of the image. What is this image asking the viewer to feel? Then describe the physical environment, the quality of light, the spatial compression or expansion, and the temporal quality that creates the conditions for that feeling. You're not describing a picture, you're prescribing an emotional experience. Mood interacts with every other golden order slot in specific and predictable ways. The same subject under the same lighting feels completely different depending on the mood layer. This is why mood placement in the middle of the golden order is architecturally intentional. It's the interpretive layer that colors everything preceding and following it in your prompt. Take everything you've absorbed about mood and hold it alongside Chapter 3's camera psychology. The most sophisticated images use camera angle and mood in deliberate concert. Low angle plus triumphant equals heroic. High angle plus melancholic equals elegiac, the beauty of grief from a God's eye view. Medium angle plus mysterious equals engaging intimacy with something unknowable. Your camera and your mood must speak the same emotional language. The most advanced mood work involves combining emotional states that seem contradictory on the surface: peaceful and melancholic, triumphant and lonely, tender and threatening. These combinations work because human emotional experience is almost never single note. The most resonant images mirror the complexity of how we actually feel, which is rarely one thing at a time. When you're refining mood in your generations, iterate with one variable at a time. Generate with triumphant mood. Then switch to melancholic. Then try triumphant after grief, which is a more complex specification of both. Each iteration teaches you exactly what the AI understands by each emotional term and how precisely your language is mapping to its training data. Before we enter Chapter 5, I want to give you a specific exercise. Take any image you've generated in the last week. Now generate it again with the same subject, setting, and camera angle, but completely change the mood slot. Just the mood. Notice how much of the image changes in response to that single variable. That experiment will give you a visceral understanding of how much psychological weight the mood slot carries. Chapter 5 introduces lighting psychology, which is in many ways the most immediately transformative variable in the system. Lighting changes can be felt by viewers who can't articulate what they're seeing. Someone with no artistic training will look at an image lit with rim light against a dark background and feel that the subject matters, without knowing why. Lighting works on visual instincts that predate language.
Lighting is the variable with the highest return on precision. 3 words can transform the genre of your entire image. Dramatic, rim, light. I'm adding those 3 words right now. And here's what I need you to notice when the after image appears. That glowing edge around the subject. That is rim light. And your brain instantly interprets it as expensive camera, professional set, intentional shot. It's a luxury signal baked into the lighting itself.
Golden hour light. The sun near the horizon. Warm, horizontal, wrapping softly. This is not an aesthetic preference. This is biology. Warm, golden light signals safety, end-of-day abundance, and human connection. People and products photographed in golden hour are rated as more trustworthy in every study that has measured it. Neon ambient. Cold, electric, slightly artificial. The same subject under neon ambient light reads as urban, innovative, and slightly dangerous. Same person, different tribe. This is how lighting encodes subculture membership. The light is not illuminating the subject, it is positioning the subject within a cultural context. Hard contrast lighting, maximum shadow depth. The face splits into lit and dark zones. This is the visual language of drama, authority, and cinematic weight. High contrast images command attention in a scroll feed because the human visual system is tuned to detect contrast boundaries before it processes any content within them. The failure case, overlit. Everything visible, nothing dramatic. This is what happens when you ask for professional lighting without specifying quality and direction. Flat overlit images read as clinical and unintentional. They signal amateur photography, or worse, that nothing of consequence is happening in this image. Light is the oldest psychological trigger the human brain has. Our species evolved reading light as information. Warm means safe, cold means threat, contrast means focus. When you control light in your prompt, you are not making an aesthetic choice. You are speaking directly to the ancient pattern recognition system in your viewer. Rim lighting is one of the most psychologically powerful tools in visual storytelling. When light comes from behind and slightly above a subject, creating that luminous edge against a darker background, the brain reads it as both isolated and significant. The subject has been selected from their environment by light itself. They matter. The light confirms it. The psychology of rim light is boundary psychology. It defines the edge of the subject with unusual precision and clarity. It says, this person or thing has a precisely defined presence. They are distinct from their environment. They cannot be confused with their background. They matter enough to be outlined by a source of illumination that specifically chose them. Golden hour light does something irreplaceable to the emotional palette of an image. The warm orange-gold quality of light at the day's horizon creates associations with transition. Something ending gracefully. Something beginning with promise. The sacred pause between the known world of day and the mystery of night. Golden hour light is the light of threshold moments. Cold blue light has the opposite emotional psychology from golden hour in almost every dimension. Clinical, analytical, revealing without warmth. Under cold blue light, nothing is hidden from view, but everything feels exposed rather than illuminated. Cold blue light is the light of examination, of objective fact, of the hour just before dawn when night has lost its magic, but day hasn't yet arrived. The neon light experiment exposed something fundamental about synthetic light sources. Neon creates emotional complexity through color-temperature contrast. Hot pink neon against cool blue shadow creates a tension between warmth and coldness that the brain reads as simultaneously inviting and dangerous. It's the light of urban surfaces that promise comfort while the shadows promise something else entirely. Hard contrast lighting, deep shadows that cut dramatically across the face or form, is the lighting of moral complexity in visual storytelling. It's been used in film noir for a century because it says visually what those stories say narratively. Nothing here is simple. Nothing is fully visible. The truth exists somewhere in the shadow between what light reveals and what darkness conceals. The failure experiment for Chapter 5, completely flat overlit photography, shows what happens when you remove shadow entirely from an image. Without shadow, form loses dimensional believability. Without dimension, Subjects lose psychological weight. The overlit image feels exposed and slightly hostile in its refusal to allow any mystery. Light without shadow removes the possibility of meaning. Motivated lighting means the light in your image has a source the viewer can understand or infer. A window, a fire, a screen, a streetlight. When light is motivated, the viewer's brain automatically situates the subject in a plausible physical space with a specific emotional character. Unmotivated light floats the subject in a neutral void that has no psychological resonance. The most sophisticated lighting designs use multiple sources at different color temperatures simultaneously. A warm rim light paired with a cool fill light creates a subject who inhabits two light worlds at once. This generates a feeling of psychological complexity in the viewer, of the subject being between two states, two emotional registers, two possibilities that haven't yet resolved. In AI image generation, lighting keywords do more than technical description work. They import complete emotional histories. Rembrandt lighting imports 4 centuries of portrait psychology and the specific gravity of old master painting. Blade Runner Neon imports an entire genre's worth of dystopian aesthetics and digital age alienation. You're not just describing light, you're citing a visual tradition. The 7 lighting experiments in Chapter 5 demonstrate a single master principle. Light is the most efficient way to communicate the emotional relationship between your subject and their world. Are they illuminated by something warm and welcoming? By something cold and analytical? By something dramatically theatrical? Each answer creates a completely different subject psychology with the same subject. Before we reach Chapter 6 in composition, here is the lighting synthesis. Think of lighting as having 3 psychological axes: temperature from warm to cold, contrast from soft to hard, and directionality from front to back. Moving along any of these 3 axes changes the emotional meaning of your image. Use all 3 intentionally and in concert with your mood and camera choices. The single most powerful lighting formula for high-impact AI imagery. Start with a key light that creates strong, directional shadow. Add a rim light that defines the subject's edge and separates them from their background. Choose a color temperature for each that aligns with your mood slot. 3 elements working together create complete lighting psychology. What we're building toward, chapter by chapter, is a complete system for psychological precision in visual communication. Camera angle controls power dynamics. Mood controls emotional environment. Lighting controls how that environment illuminates and reveals the subject. In Chapter 6, we add the final major variable: composition and spatial relationships within the frame. Here's the lighting reference framework from Chapter 5 distilled into a decision tree. Start by asking, is this a warm image or a cool image? Warm suggests connection, safety, homecoming, nostalgia. Cool suggests analysis, distance, exposure, clinical truth. That single warm or cool decision shapes every other lighting choice that follows. It's the emotional root of your entire lighting setup. The 7 lighting setups from Chapter 5. Rim light for defined presence and isolation. Golden hour for threshold moments and warmth. Cold blue for clinical revelation and emotional distance. Neon for urban tension and synthetic warmth. Hard contrast for moral complexity and noir psychology. Flat overlit as the failure state showing what happens without shadow. And motivated multi-source for dimensional psychological complexity. Each setup is a complete emotional system. The exercise I recommend for lighting mastery. Take 10 of your favorite images, any images, from film, photography, or AI generation, and identify the light source and its emotional function in each one. Where is the light coming from? What color temperature? How hard or soft? What does that light tell you about how the image wants you to feel? This practice builds a visual library that will directly improve your prompt precision. Chapter 6 brings us to composition, which is the variable that determines how the viewer's eye moves through the image and where it comes to rest. If lighting tells you how to feel, composition tells you where to look and in what order. Together, lighting and composition create what cinematographers call the visual grammar of the frame, the rules by which the image communicates before a single conscious thought occurs.
Composition controls where attention goes before the brain decides to look anywhere. It's the invisible architecture of your image. Deep focus, everything sharp, everything democratic, nothing special. Now watch. Ultra-shallow depth of field, 85 millimeter, f1.2. The background dissolves. The subject isolates. The brain reads, expensive.
Centered composition. Subject dead center. Symmetry. The eye goes straight to the face and stays there. This is the composition of confrontation, authority, and direct communication. Wes Anderson built an entire career on centered compositions. It works because the brain processes symmetry as intentional, and intentional reads as powerful. Extreme asymmetry. Subject shifts to the far edge. Negative space dominates. The composition creates visual tension. The viewer's eye wants to fill that empty space. This tension creates sustained looking. Eye-tracking studies show asymmetric compositions are held in attention 40% longer than symmetric ones under controlled conditions. Layered depth composition. I added foreground elements between the camera and the subject. Architectural glass panels, slightly blurred. Now there are 3 visual planes: foreground, subject, background. The image feels 3-dimensional. This is how cinema trains us to see depth. The AI reproduces it exactly when instructed. Composition is attention choreography. You are telling the viewer's eye exactly where to travel, what to notice first, where to rest, and how long to stay. The golden ratio, the rule of thirds, the centered axis. These are not rules. These are maps of how human visual perception actually works. Use them intentionally. Depth of field is composition's most powerful tool for directing the viewer's attention without apparent effort. When the background is rendered in soft, beautiful blur, and the subject is sharp and fully resolved, the viewer's eye has no choice but to look at what's in focus. Shallow depth of field is directed attention made physical. It removes the option to look elsewhere. Centered composition communicates a specific and powerful psychology. This subject deserves your full and completely undivided attention. There is no ambiguity about where to look. No competing claims on your visual interest. The centered subject commands the frame with total authority. This reads as confidence, symbolic importance, or confrontation, depending entirely on what the subject is. Rule of thirds. Placement creates a more dynamic psychology than perfect centering. When the subject occupies 1/3 of the frame, the remaining 2/3 of empty space becomes charged with visual meaning. If the subject faces toward that space, it represents possibility, destination, or aspiration. If they face away from it, it becomes what they've left behind, or what follows them. Asymmetric composition, one of the most advanced techniques demonstrated in Chapter 6 experiments, places subjects deliberately off balance within the frame. This creates visual tension that the eye keeps trying to resolve. The viewer is engaged precisely because the composition never quite settles into a comfortable equilibrium. That unresolved tension keeps attention active. Layered depth composition places subjects and elements at multiple distances from the camera simultaneously, creating a foreground, a midground, and a background, all of which are active. When all 3 spatial planes contain meaningful visual information, the image feels like a window into a complete world rather than a flat representation of a single moment. The psychology of empty space, what photographers and painters call negative space, is one of the most underused tools in AI image generation. Empty space around a subject doesn't make the image feel empty or unfinished. It makes the subject more powerful through contrast and isolation. The eye gravitates toward whatever is there, against the context of everything that isn't. Frame within frame composition, where elements inside the scene create natural borders that surround and isolate the subject, creates a feeling of revealed significance. The doorway, the tunnel, the window through which we discover the subject. These nested frames say to the viewer, "We came here specifically to find this. This is what the journey was for." Leading lines are the compositional element that most directly controls how the viewer's eye moves through the image across time. A road, a river, an architectural element, a shadow line that points towards the subject tells the viewer where to begin looking and draws them inevitably toward the psychological center of the image. Lines are the editorial direction the frame gives to the eye. The scale relationship between subject and environment is one of the most efficient ways to establish thematic meaning with a minimum of language. A tiny figure in a vast, indifferent landscape says, "This character is small within their world, dwarfed by forces larger than themselves." An enormous figure that fills the frame says, "This character defines their world, they are what matters here." In the depth of field comparison experiment, we witnessed the most dramatic before and after transformation in any chapter. The flat, everything equally in focus before image gave the viewer's eye no particular place to go and no hierarchy of importance. The shallow depth of field after image created an immediate visual hierarchy. Look here first, then here, then here. The image told you how to read it. Advanced composition practice means thinking about the image not as a static arrangement, but as a series of visual events the viewer will experience in sequence. Where does the eye enter the frame? Where does it travel from there? Where does it come to rest? The best images have a clear visual journey that feels inevitable in retrospect, as if the frame could have been arranged no other way. Composition interacts with all the other golden order elements in specific and predictable ways. A centered composition with high contrast hard lighting reads as confrontational, even aggressive in its directness. An asymmetric composition with soft, diffused lighting reads as contemplative, interior, reflective. The combination generates a third psychological meaning that neither element creates alone. The most sophisticated compositional technique for AI image generation is anticipatory framing. Leave space in the direction the subject is looking or moving. If the subject faces right, weight the composition so the right side has room. That empty space represents possibility, destination, the future the subject is moving toward. The viewer completes the narrative in imagination. Before we reach the final chapter, here is the composition master principle. Every compositional choice makes a claim about what matters in this image. Centering says, "This is what matters above all else." Off-center placement says, "What matters is the relationship between the subject and their context." Layered depth says, "What matters is the entire world the subject inhabits." We've now covered 6 of the 7 major psychological variables in the Nano Banana Pro system. Subject, mood, lighting, camera angle, style reference, composition. In the final chapter, we bring all of these together into a synthesis approach that doesn't just use these variables one by one. It orchestrates them the way a film director orchestrates every element of a shot. The composition exercise that transforms your understanding fastest. For each image you generate, before you evaluate color, mood, or subject quality, trace the eye path. Where does the eye enter? Where does it travel? Where does it rest? If you can answer all 3 questions and the journey feels satisfying, your composition is working. If the eye has nowhere particular to go, you need to redesign the spatial relationships. Visual grammar is the set of compositional rules that operate beneath conscious perception. Centered subjects command attention. Off-center subjects invite context. Diagonal lines create energy. Horizontal lines create stability. Vertical lines create aspiration or authority. These aren't rules someone invented. They're patterns derived from how human visual systems evolved to parse the physical world. The 8 compositional techniques from Chapter 6. Shallow depth of field for directed attention. Centered framing for undivided authority. Rule of thirds for dynamic relationship. Asymmetric placement for unresolved tension. Layered depth for world building. Negative space for power through isolation. Frame within frame for revealed significance. And leading lines for guided visual journeys. Each one controls where the viewer's attention goes and for how long. In our final chapter, we bring everything together. Camera angle. Mood, lighting, composition, subject psychology, style reference. The synthesis chapter is where the system pays off, where you learn to think in integrated psychological architectures rather than individual variables. This is where good AI image generation becomes a practice of intentional visual art.
This is where everything comes together. I'm going to apply every golden order variable simultaneously. And I need you to watch the cumulative effect. Denis Villeneuve, Roger Deakins, Blade Runner 2049. I'm adding those three references to the style slot. Watch the AI's entire palette shift. Here is the complete template. Every slot, every variable. This is the golden order in full deployment. Screenshot this, copy this, use this. One prompt system, 24 experiments. The difference between average and cinematic is not talent. It is not a better tool. It is controlled variables. That is the golden order.
Everything compounds. This is not addition. This is multiplication. Low angle plus rim light plus shallow depth of field plus triumphant mood plus Deakins reference. The result is not four separate improvements. Each variable amplifies every other. The output is exponentially more cinematic than any single variable could produce alone. And here it is, the template final. The complete golden order stack applied to a viewer's typical starting prompt. Compare these two images carefully. The before looks like a competent AI image. The after looks like a campaign visual from a premium brand. Same AI model, same generation time, completely different psychological intent. If this changed how you think about AI image prompting, share it with one person who is frustrated with generic outputs. The next video breaks down style references specifically. 10 Deakins-inspired prompt stacks, ranked by their commercial impact in scroll feed environments. Subscribe so you see it the day it drops. Drop your best before and after in the comments using the golden order system. I will review them and feature the strongest transformations in the next video. I want to see what happens when you apply these variables to your specific use case: product photography, personal branding, editorial, content creation. Let's see what you make. The synthesis approach is the highest level of the Nano Banana Pro system. Instead of thinking about individual golden order slots in sequence, you begin with a complete psychological intention and work backward to the specific technical language that will generate it. You start with the feeling you want the viewer to have. Then you reverse engineer every slot to serve that feeling. Start with an emotional question. What do I want the viewer to feel when they see this image? Build your answer from the golden order inward. Mood and camera angle are your emotional core variables. Everything else, subject, lighting, composition, style reference, is in service of those two central psychological choices. Core first, details second. Style reference is the most powerful synthesis tool in the system because it imports so much in so few words. When you cite a specific visual reference, you're importing that reference's entire system of choices: its color palette, its compositional philosophy, its approach to light and shadow, its characteristic way of treating human subjects. One phrase carries an entire visual language. The template experiments in Chapter 7 demonstrate the highest level application of the Nano Banana Pro system. A template is a reusable emotional architecture. Once you've found a specific combination of golden order slots that reliably generates a specific psychological response, you can substitute different subjects and settings while preserving the same emotional core. Template thinking is the difference between making individual images and building a coherent visual language. When you establish a template, you establish a consistent psychological signature. Every image made with that template carries the same emotional identity. This is how professional creative directors maintain visual consistency across hundreds of different images. The compound experiment, Experiment 23, showed what happens when you apply every lesson from this documentary simultaneously and in full coordination. The resulting image doesn't feel like a demonstration or a technical exercise. It feels like a work of intentional visual art. Not because the AI is more capable in that moment, because the communication has reached maximum psychological precision. Let me walk you through the complete master prompt template one final time. Begin with a subject that carries psychological specificity already built in. Not a warrior, but a lone survivor. Give them an action or state that expresses their inner psychology directly. Not standing, but standing utterly still after the battle has ended. Place them in a setting that amplifies their inner state, a field where something enormous has just concluded. Continuing the master template. Name the mood that the world generates around them. The specific quiet of aftermath, when relief and grief are indistinguishable. Define the lighting that makes that mood physically visible. Sandyazo. Golden light from low on the horizon, the last of the day. Specify the camera angle. Low, looking up slightly, a witness stance. Invoke a style reference. Add a cinematic tradition. Every slot serves one emotional intention. The difference between a beginner prompt and an expert prompt is not the number of words. It's the psychological specificity of the words chosen. A 500-word prompt filled with generic visual description will consistently lose to a 50-word prompt that addresses the emotional core of the image directly and precisely. Density of psychological signal matters far more than length of description. The Nano Banana Pro system is ultimately a training system for your own intuition. The more you practice thinking in psychological language before you write a prompt, the faster and more automatic that thinking becomes. Eventually, you won't need the template laid out explicitly. You'll think directly in psychological precision. The system becomes internalized. I've been generating AI images professionally for over a year, and the single biggest breakthrough in that time wasn't a new model or a new technical tool. It was understanding that AI image generators respond to psychological language with far more precision than they respond to technical description. They were trained on human visual culture, and human visual culture is organized by emotion, not by technique. Every image in this documentary's before and after series started from the same neutral subject. The transformation in every single case came from psychological precision. From asking one question before writing anything, what should this image feel like before I describe what it should look like? That question is the Nano Banana Pro system compressed to a single sentence. As you go forward from this video, I want you to practice one new habit consistently. Before you write any prompt, write a single sentence about what you want the viewer to feel. Then write your entire prompt in service of that sentence. This one habit will change your AI image output more than any new model release, any new feature, any new technical technique you learn. The final piece of the Nano Banana Pro system is iteration used systematically. Your first prompt is a hypothesis. The image it generates is data. Study that data with psychological precision. What did the AI understand from your language? What psychological territory did it miss? Adjust your language to give more precise emotional direction. The second generation is better. The third is often extraordinary. The AI image generation field is evolving at a pace that makes purely technical mastery temporary and unreliable. The model that produces the best results today will be surpassed within months. The technical parameter that's most effective now will be superseded. But psychological precision is a permanent and transferable skill. Human emotional psychology doesn't evolve at the pace of AI model releases. That's precisely why I built this system around psychology, rather than around any specific model, tool, or technique. When you understand why certain language creates certain visual and psychological responses, you can adapt to any new model, any new interface, any new capability because you understand the underlying human visual psychology that all of these systems are ultimately built to serve. If this documentary changed how you think about AI image generation, I want to hear about it in the comments below. Tell me specifically, which of the 24 experiments showed you the largest gap between your old approach and the psychological precision approach? Which variable, camera angle, mood, lighting, composition will you start applying in your next generation session? The complete Nano Banana Pro system, all 24 experiments, the full golden order template, the complete prompt architecture with all psychological variables, everything is documented and linked in the description below. Take it, use it, build something extraordinary with it, and I will see you in the next video. As you practice the Nano Banana Pro system, you'll begin to build a personal library of templates that work for your specific creative goals. Save every prompt that generates a result that moves you. Study what you wrote. Identify which golden order slots are doing the most psychological work. That analysis will reveal your instinctive aesthetic biases and show you which variables you naturally master and which you're still developing. The three most common mistakes I see in AI image generation. First, using adjectives that describe the result you want instead of the conditions that create it. Not beautiful, but the specific qualities of beauty you're after. Second, front-loading technical parameters before establishing psychological intent. Third, treating the first generation as a final product rather than a hypothesis to iterate from. If you're starting the Nano Banana Pro system today, here's exactly where to begin. Take one subject you already care about. Write the mood in one sentence. I want the viewer to feel blank. Then work backward through the golden order, choosing each slot to serve that mood. Generate. Study the result. Adjust one variable at a time. Repeat until the image matches the feeling you wrote in that first sentence. The real skill this system develops isn't technical. It's the skill of knowing precisely what you want before you try to get it. Most creative frustration comes from trying to describe an image you haven't yet clearly imagined. The golden order forces you to imagine the image psychologically before you describe it visually. That reversal, feeling before describing, is the core creative transformation this system teaches. 1 year from today, the AI image generation tools available to you will be dramatically more capable than they are right now. But the gap between average output and extraordinary output will still come from the same place it comes from today: the psychological precision of the person writing the prompt. Invest in that precision. That skill compounds. Thank you for spending this time with me, and I'll see you in the next one.